So hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. This is about my Big Boi tables. Big Boi! Except since there's two of them, this is part two, so it's Big Boi part two. Big Boi! In the last video you saw us building this guy. He's all done, and just so you know, we filmed that 16 months ago. So it's been a journey everybody, but we got it done. Let me tell you about what went right on it, because you saw us building it and it was a little complicated for us. So when we were building it, I didn't really show you how I made the legs, but the legs are attached like that, and that's a big enough glue joint for most people, but I like putting dowels in there. My only regret is I used dowels and I tried to put them in coming out at a 45 degree from that corner. It didn't work out very well because it was too hard to line it up. So since there is such a big glue area there, I made my dowels come straight out into the leg instead of on the corner. That helped out a lot when I was building this and assembling it and putting it together. The other thing that I had difficulty with was, as you saw in the last video, Karen and I were gluing the two big halves together, and I thought it was a really easy thing to do. But once I cleaned off the glue, in the middle, there's a big gap, and it was just too big of a gap. I didn't like it. So what do you do when you have a gap in woodworking? You make the gap bigger and you fill it with epoxy so it looks like it's part of your design instead of a horrible life mistake.
You're so dramatic.
But it turned out nice because we just made a little 1/2-inch groove in there, filled it with epoxy and some swirls, and it looks like it's supposed to be there. It's not a life mistake, everybody. I am not my mistakes. Kara, stop laughing at me. Kara's laughing at me off camera.
I am Buzz, stuck here inside this hideous body.
After that, it was the sanding part, and everything went well, except if you notice there's two big circles of epoxy in there. No, again, that wasn't planned, but when you cover life mistakes with epoxy, that's what happens. When we flattened everything out, there is two spots where we didn't sand it enough, and there was saw marks in there, and I would have had to go in like another 1/8 inch of sanding, and I didn't want to do that, so we just added epoxy. You essentially just drilled it out and added epoxy to it.
You talking about the planets?
Yeah.
Oh, I like them.
I know, but they were mistakes because they weren't supposed to be there.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson would be.
He would. So if you notice our little galaxy planets of epoxy, they look good. They look like they're supposed to be there, but they were just two defects in the wood after we were sanding it, and we couldn't sand it anymore, so we drilled them out. And then there's this third one over here because, again, another defect. We fixed it. So the last thing that happened on this guy was it was all done, glued up, full of epoxy, and before I finished it, we just let it sit for about several weeks to a month. And the whole thing cracked, and it looked really bad. But usually when things crack, we do what we do. We fill it with epoxy. So whenever the cracks formed from internal stresses and all of this hardwood, I smushed my epoxy and sawdust filler in it, and it turned out well. So here's a close-up of what it looks like.
Hey, look, driving these babies out behind her.
So wherever you see some black in between all of these boards, that was a crack. And some of them just cracked a little bit, some of them cracked a lot of it, and it looks better. It wasn't something that I planned for. The overall look looks nice, and it matches all the ugliness in the legs because the legs were old barn boards that were full of cracks. Wherever there's a circle in the legs, that was a bug that we had to drill out, and then we filled that with epoxy. So I would give myself like a good A- on this because there are things that I'm not happy with. Overall, it's a very good project. So that is Big Boi number 1. Now it's time for Big Boi number 2. So besides the big round boy here, the wood joinery I have in this, since it's my most complicated design. If you can't see the joinery, I keep it really simple because nobody's gonna know it's there except other woodworkers, and they're not buying my stuff anyways. My primary ones are dowels and biscuits. They're easy to use. The trait taught in high school wood shop, so anybody can do it. It's easy, it's quick, and that's what I use. So let me show you stuff. Okay, yeah, practice makes perfect. So it's taken apart like this. There's dowels, the legs, dowels. I have uno, dos, tres. I have 3 of them. My big backbone, that is all biscuits because I think they're fun, and it's, I don't know, I'm not always in dowels. I like biscuits sometimes, just it's a personal preference. And the connector piece for the legs is dowels as well. I'm gonna start gluing this up, but yeah, dowels and biscuits because it's easy to do. Nobody sees it, so why spend a lot of time doing joinery? Nobody's gonna see if this works just as well. At least I think so. Do I need to? Yes, I need to put that back on. Ah, why'd I take it off? Okay. Well, montage mode. So this one was fun because it was quite the complicated build for me, because I just can't put something normal. It has to be at an angle, or it has to be balancing on a metal cylinder.
You should not be here, senor.
And it has to have a 2-inch bolt going and all that stuff. So as I explained in the video, I have lots of wood joinery in it. You really can't see it because why sit there and do a lot of wood joinery if nobody's gonna see it? So this one turned out really well. There are some issues that popped up that we fixed, and here are those issues in case you are planning a weird thing like this. So this guy has a big 14-inch wide piece of wood on top. I eventually had to add this piece of Purple Heart underneath it because I thought the pieces I had in there originally, that piece of oak coupled with the steel, was enough support on the top. It wasn't enough support. We found out after about a couple of weeks to a month again that the top part cupped right there. And when everything's already put together, you can't really flatten it out. You have to add some parts to it. So that's what we did. We added some of that Purple Heart to keep that top flat. But there's another issue we had with it too. The second issue we had were these curved pieces of white oak that I had to stabilize the top onto that circular piece of steel. I had those same pieces on the bottom, except when I put the screws on, those bottom pieces would move slightly and then it wasn't flush with the bottom. I found out that I can't have 2 single pieces like I did on the top for the bottom. So what we did is, instead of 2 little pieces, it was 1 big piece. It's just a little skinny in the middle, so this entire round boiler part sits on that 1 chunk of Purple Heart. And it kind of worked out because now it matches the chunk of Purple Heart on the top. I have an added feature of a little medallion of copper epoxy in each one, and that matches the copper epoxy in the top. So that copper epoxy wasn't supposed to be there. I had holes drilled out in them just for looks so it would match all the copper tubing in it. But then as luck would have it, when I added my big screws going through the top, it went right through one of those holes and you could see it. So I had to add copper epoxy in there, and then I had to drill holes out in that top piece of Purple Heart so it would match. So just because I didn't measure really well, I had added work to do.
My question, or it's like half question, half statement. It's a question, sorry. What spawned the idea to make that table out of that piece we found in the dumpster?
We found that piece, so I designed a table around it.
What made you come up with that design?
I stared at it. I didn't have an idea, I just went.
So you're just like, I have this piece we dumpstered over for, and you're like, I gotta use it as a leg in something, and then that's
Yeah.
pretty much it?
Yep, and I just kept finding pieces and I designed them. And then I would tweak them and design them more. But you can't hear anything because the goddamn lawnmower. So that's the Big Boy video. We made 2 big boys, made 2 videos out of it.
Put up your gloves.
And that's our rescue cat man. But I thought we'd share these videos with people just because they were not normal builds. Some of them were kind of complicated. Lots of mistakes were made, and I'd like to share how I fixed my mistakes because this is a community. We're helping each other out. This is what YouTube is supposed to be.
You know, you're talking about not normal builds. Aren't you yourself strange and unusual?
Yeah, it's like the girl from Beetlejuice.
Strange and unusual.
Hope you enjoyed the Big Boy build part 2. Thanks for watching, everybody. We appreciate it. Thanks to our patrons who like watching these goofy videos and supporting us. And oh, and the god on.
Longboard! Ah! She's great outside the window.
Big Boi, come here!
And we will see you next time, everybody. Bye.